All right, and just to kick us off, I just threw a poll in the chat to gauge folks' experience using Experience Cloud. Do you have Experience Cloud on your campus? Are you using it? Are you familiar with it? We have a lot of intermediate folks, one pro. All right. So a great variety here, and a lot of brand new folks and a lot of intermediate folks. So I think we'll have a lot to learn from Mario's expertise today. So to get us started, I'm Amy Jacobson. I am with the University of Denver and on the Higher Education Advisory Council. And I am so thrilled to introduce Mario today, to have him talk about upgrading the user experience in Experience Cloud. So Mario, take it away.
Thanks, Amy. So yeah, I am the user experience designer for the University of Arizona. I have been here for about 4 years, and I currently work with a couple of teams. One of them, obviously, a Salesforce team, a great team. We also we have a product owner, architects, developers, admins, and a lot of great students. So you'll see in all of these teams, we have some student workers that work with us. And so as I mentioned, I'm part of a couple of teams, Salesforce, and also on the app side, there is a small team there responsible building a custom app. So, and the student workers that work with me, we share some of that work across those projects. So the one of the things we'll be talking about, obviously, is Experience Cloud. We use what we call Cat Cloud. We use Experience Cloud for our Cat Cloud product. This is a hub for bringing together important information. And it started as a service for students and has expanded to include staff. And we hope to expand to other audiences. So the users can access advisor information. This is through an API with SIS and some user record data. Appointments, which is a custom scheduling that our team had built. And class schedules and assignments, which is an API pulling in D12 data. And service cases, which pull mostly Salesforce cases, but also sort of recently ServiceNow data through an API. Personal plans is also somewhat new, which is also custom. And events, which is pulling from Salesforce with Blackthorn. And we do actually mix in some API events coming from other teams on campus. So that we do obviously use Blackthorn, but there are events from other parts that we sort of mix in there to display on Cat Cloud. We also have news, but that is specific for staff, because one of the things we learned is students were a little less interested in the news. So, but it was a prominent thing for staff. So that was something we wanted to have for staff for sure. And it's possible we can expand out to students later if we hear that it is something valuable. We also have a lot of resources that are linked in Cat Cloud. So most of Cat Cloud is made up of components using Lightning Web Components. There are still a few, I believe there's still a few Aura components, and we have built some components with Squid, but for future plans, we are planning to do more on the Lightning Web Component side of things. On the app side, as I mentioned, this is a custom app that our one full-time developer and student developers are responsible for. This is Android and iOS, and we pull in a few APIs there. So the campus map that you see here, that is through an API, and light mode and dark mode. We also have real-time transit information, which is our CAT-TRAN. That's through an API, parking permits, also an API, and appointments, which is coming from Salesforce, but through an API. That is just view only, so people can't make appointments. They're just viewing the current appointments they have, as well as events, the event RSVPs. Any events that users have registered for are going to show up in the app, and that's also coming through an API there. Also, recently, we've added study space reservations. So we worked with the library through an API to display reservations for study spaces. And the app obviously has links to a lot of resources. So that's very similar to Cat Cloud. So we're always looking for ways to bring value to our users. We identify our problems and solve them in a few ways. So I might use a lot of different research methods to gather some feedback, depending on what we're doing. If it's a new product, we might go a little more in depth. If it's something we're iterating on, it could be just quick feedback. But not only do we listen to user feedback, we're also analyzing the data to see what they're actually doing, because it's very common in UX to listen to users, and users will say certain things and then do different things. So that's one of the things we want to make sure we can really align to make sure we're actually bringing value by actually seeing the products and features being used. So our teams also bring a lot of feedback to us, which is very valuable for me. So our support team communicate the feedback and frustrations, and our product owner and team members communicate user needs and constraints. And our data team will analyze the usage of our products and features, and they'll report on that. And also we do use some Google Analytics to track certain Cat Cloud features, just to see what's actually sticking, what's actually, and then ultimately we want to see if it's actually bringing value, if we see that they're returning and continuing to use those features. So I'll take all of this into consideration when I plan like future iterations on designs. So it's really valuable for me. Early on for Cat Cloud and the app, we would often hear, I want everything in one place. So one of the things is, depending on the scenario, users might need to, they might need to do different tasks, or the context could change the requirements. So before we get into some examples, just going to keep in mind some of the UX best practices. So here's some common things that I hear, and I sort of just translated. But this, I might hear this from users, but I also might hear it from our team when they're communicating. Sort of the obvious ones is don't make me think and make it easy for me to do the right thing. So we obviously don't want to make it easy for people to do the wrong thing, especially deleting records or doing a task that is really intensive, like importing, hundreds of thousands of records just because they didn't read something and it's really easy for them to do. So I want to try to avoid those types of things. So another one is getting things done faster. That's, I think everybody wants to get things done faster, especially when we don't plan on doing something. So if somebody's getting some sort of notification or they have to react to something, we want to try to make that really easy, so it's just not really a painful task. Another very common thing is too many options makes it hard to decide. So just like choosing like a flavor of ice cream, if there's too many choices, it's going to make it really hard, and it's going to sort of be a negative experience. So this also means that just because you can add a feature doesn't mean that you should, because adding too many features just because it's easy could actually have a negative impact in a lot of cases. So choose wisely. Another very common one is nobody likes change. So we all feel a little pain when we have to change our habits, but we see a lot of, but if the user can see the value and it's easy for them to make a switch, it'll make it a little easier for them. And the last one is, I know it when I see it. This is Sometimes we have to do, we'll get feedback from users. Just either I'll design some sort of concept, or the team will make a proof of concept if there's a lot of functionality. It's really important to get valuable feedback with something like that. So sometimes we'll do that and get some feedback from like a small group of people, and that's really valuable, especially when you're talking about like projects that take a long time. So since Cat Cloud is using Experience Cloud, let's take a look at some web platform things that the web platform will bring us. So obviously there's no app to be installed. That's great. It's low barrier from that standpoint. And then any device connected to the internet can access Cat Cloud. And then, of course, the URL is probably the most powerful thing for the web. You can take that URL, share it around everywhere, and get to the same place. If we design things in a responsive way, meaning we design for mobile and desktop and make things sort of be squishy, that simplifies a lot of the UI and actually improves the accessibility as well. Because we have to, if we're designing in a sort of mobile first way of responsive, it forces us to design for this smaller like viewport, I guess, which forces us to remove too much complexity in the interface or the options. So yeah, and then accessibility, a lot of low vision users will zoom in really close, which is the equivalent of just having a smaller viewport. So a lot of things are built into that. And as you may have caught on there, we do try to keep accessibility in mind from when we start planning a project to the build process and even after we release it. Apps can give us extra features to enhance the user experience. Authentication, this is a very handy thing. Authentication can happen one time, and it doesn't necessarily need a user to log in again because it's on their device. So this starts to make things very convenient just out of the box there. And it's easier to access whatever information you're putting in there. So also our devices are more secure with biometrics like Face ID and fingerprint. And this is for most modern devices. Push notifications can get information to users faster. We can obviously also include some ways to control what messages are getting instantly. We don't want to send, spam messages and start to kind of degrade. We start to abuse that push notification. And of course, mobile devices feel more personal. I know if we were to lose our mobile device, it could be a big deal. So it is personal for all of us. And in our research, we found using different, we found a lot of users using different methods to share information from their device. So we would see them using apps, emails, text messages, all these things. I can't tell you how many times, of course, a lot of students would just take a screenshot and then just text it to somebody in a group. Those are things that are very common. We have to expect that that's going to happen. And as a UX person, I'm less about trying to force people to change their habits and more about embracing it and seeing what we can do with that. So those are things to at least keep in mind. And then the last one is location. So if it makes sense, we could use location to enhance features. Geolocation is obviously more broad. Wi-Fi and NFC start to get a little more specific. Platform context can affect the type and it can affect the type of content and how it's presented. So because the web is mostly commonly used on desktop, users are more likely to engage for longer periods of time. So browsing, searching, and reading long forms of text. It can often, they'll often also be seated at a desk or standing at a desk. and they have multiple windows, tabs, and it's very common for them to also have another device with them. So it's good to keep all of those things in mind. On the app side, it is primarily for short interactions, checking for updates, making minor changes to existing plans, and users often they often need immediate answers to things like details for appointments and details for events and looking things up, and links to resources. They're trying to find something. I like to think of it as like people are doing things in Cat Cloud to basically create records, and then on mobile they just go there to make updates and make minor changes in the app there. So here's a few things we learned with Cat Cloud. It's great to start testing user value and most products and services, most new, like the new products and services you might be planning to release. The web is also like it's everywhere and on a wider range of devices. So when you push out updates, they're mostly instant. I only say mostly because sometimes there's caching, but for the most part, you can roll that out and it's just everywhere automatically. Obviously with apps, you have to wait for updates. So that could be a negative thing depending on what you have as features. The web is also good for browsing and searching records. And it is important to keep accessibility in mind from planning all the way through testing. Then the last thing is it can be cumbersome. And we sort of take some of these things for granted because we are sort of used to it. But with Experience Cloud, not just Experience Cloud, but just the web in general, it can be cumbersome because you have to log into something to make sure you are secure, and sessions have to time out. And then if you're on a public computer, you might have to log out before you walk away. And then there are some issues with page performance, especially when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of records, something like that. So on the app side, here's a few things we learned in the app regarding the app. It's great for index for increasing value and by making data easier to access. It's great for checking for updates. Apps can potentially use system features, and users are already like comfortable with those things. Using standard UI components can be more common, which also means that making accessible components can be a little easier because those standard components usually have a lot of the accessibility built in. So the last thing is very specific to our app, but you may have noticed in the screenshot before that the map was very prominent. Currently, the map is the primary feature, but it's slowing down the time it takes for users to get into the app. So it also became obvious that users would only need to use the app because it was primarily the map. So as soon as people would get comfortable with campus, they wouldn't return because they didn't need the map anymore. So we are planning to shift from the map being a feature, or from being the feature to a feature. And we want to do more integrations and to make that a little more prominent, and also to focus on providing users value with a wider range of information and at the right time. So it would be great if we can provide certain information either early in the semester or later in the semester, depending on what's going on. Also, maybe tied to certain things that are happening around campus. That would be really great. So some key takeaways. Experience Cloud for us was good for long interactions, searching, browsing, long-form text. It was good for iterating and refining major features, and custom work should be considered. When you're doing custom work, you should consider responsive design and accessibility for better engagement. And for the app, if you're getting started with an app, start with short, valuable interactions. And if you plan on pulling in Salesforce data, start with viewing that data before you add editing abilities. And then apps are good for summarizing what users do in Experience Cloud. And the last thing is consider leveraging the device hardware and software features to add to the overall experience. All right, I think I'm out of time.
Thank you so much, Mario. We just have a couple quick questions in the chat before we hop over. A couple folks asked just for clarification around what your app is built on. So are you using mobile publisher and publishing your Experience Cloud site using kind of native Salesforce functionality, or did you build the app in-house?
Yeah, so the app, from what I remember now, since I'm not the developer, so we are using Swift UI. So that's all custom stuff. We're not using any products. That's all hand-coded. On the iOS side, it's Swift. And on the Android side, it's using a lot of XML, but I think they're also doing some things with Kotlin. So I think that's as far as I know.
Okay, great. And then Jim also asked, have you seen any challenges with maintaining visual elements between device types, tablet versus phone, or operating systems?
Yeah, with tablet, not so much, but that's probably because it's a very small audience that is using tablet. So at least on the design side, I'll look at anything that's over maybe 8% of our audience. And then from there, I start looking at device specific things to see where we're at. But for the most part, we do try to make it at least fit on mobile. For mobile apps, we still kind of think in that responsive way. And as far as UI goes, we are supporting mostly like Material 2, Material 3 on the Android side, and on iOS are fairly recent things, but nothing really major that we're aware of as far as UI differences.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mario, and thank you everyone for joining this session today. We will see you over at the closing celebration.
Thanks, everyone.